Good afternoon. I'm calling to order this meeting of our Housing Policy and Development Committee. I'm Councilmember Cam Gordon, and I'm joined by Councilmembers Reich, Schrader, Ellison, and Goodman. We're a quorum of the committee, and we can conduct our business. There's 4 items on our agenda today. 1 consent item, a public hearing, and 2 discussion items. I'm going to go ahead and move the consent item first. This is just a staff referral on the subject matter of an ordinance amending Title 12, Chapter 244 of the Minneapolis Code of Ordinances relating to housing, having to do with renter protections ordinance. Any discussion on that consent item? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That carries. Then we'll go to our public hearing. This is a hearing on a quitclaim deed, which also is a form of a land sale. And we'll get a brief explanation of what we're doing here by Mr. Ramadan. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, committee members. This is a very unique land sale to correct the title description coming through the Minneapolis Homes program, which is, the policies for the program were established by the City Council on December 11th, 2015. 2212 36th Avenue North was acquired on July 12th, 2017 from Hennepin County as tax forfeited land for the appraised value of $1. During the title commitment process, the city's title company noticed a discrepancy between the legal description in the deed and the city received from the state and the language in the previous record deeds of the property. In its tax forfeiture process, Hennepin County used a description that inadvertently included property that belongs to the adjacent property. To correct the property line as intended, staff recommends that the city convey a quitclaim deed for $1 to the owner of the adjacent property at 3600 Queen Avenue North. This action will release the city's interest in that property, and that the city may, This action will release any interest that the city may have in that part of lots 8 and 9, Block 8, Oakwood addition to Minneapolis, Hennepin County, Minnesota, lying west of east 62 feet as measured along the north-south lines. I know it's a lot of legalese, but are there any questions?
I don't see any questions. Okay. Thank you very much for the presentation.
All right.
Since this is a land sale, this is a public hearing, or we will have a public hearing, so I'm going to open that public hearing now and see if anybody's here to discuss this matter. Seeing nobody, then I will close the public hearing and I will move approval of this resolution, which will authorize the execution of our quitclaim deed. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. Anybody abstaining? That motion passes. Now we'll move on to our 2 discussion items. The first is about Affordable Housing Trust Fund Award for the Dundee Hope Block Stabilization Phase 2 project. And the second one is about a contract with Minnesota Homeownership Center. And we're going to have brief presentations on both of those. And I believe we'll have Ms. Dolly Cruther talking to us a little bit about the Dundee Hope Block Phase 2 project.
Good afternoon. I'm Dolly Crowther. I'm here today to talk about the Dundee Hope Block Stabilization Project. Councilmember Gordon, members of the committee, this is a request for $199,000 of affordable housing trust funds for the Dundee Hope Block Stabilization Phase 2 project. The project is in scattered site units and it's located along Portland Avenue, 5th Street, and East 22nd Street. There are 30 units in the project representing 1, 2, 3, and 4+ bedrooms. The Dundee house, which is one of the properties, was transformed in 2002 from a desolate half-vacant property into a well-performing property for homeless families. In 2010, Hope Community began a partnership with Cabrini Partnership, which is now PPL, part of PPL, to provide services for the long-term homeless families. There are 25 GRH, which is group residency housing units through Hennepin County in the project, 23 of those serving long-term homeless. Many of the residents are chemically dependent. This is a request for $199,000, and it is the second phase of the whole block project. The first phase was completed between 2006 and 2008 and assisted 16 units. The second phase includes the remaining units that were not part of the original rehab. The scope of work includes critical structural work, major interior and exterior work, new roofs, and new bathroom and kitchen repair and replacement. In 2016, the city approved over $200,000 out of a trust funds for this project. Since that time, MHFA architects looked at the project and realized that the amount wasn't feasible, and there was significantly more work to be done on the project. This involved the other lenders, which is Hennepin County, Met Council, and the City of Minneapolis. The rule with Met Council is they cannot put more in than the City of Minneapolis, so there became a gap to the project. To close this gap, of course, the City of Minneapolis took over and included $199,000 of our trust funds to close the gap on the project. So our total commitment to this project is a little over $400,000 with a per unit cost of over $13,000 per unit. In addition to that, I'm requesting a release of 2 properties that are in the project, 2011 and 2101 Portland Avenue. They were originally in the project in the beginning, and now they have to be removed because they're going to be part of the new whole block stabilization, so you can't commit them with an old project and then now a new project, so they have to be released. So today I'm asking for 2 requests for the release and also for the additional $199,000 of affordable housing trust funds to the project. Are there any questions?
I don't see any questions. So I think this is, maybe I just have one question. This is an area that I think that we've been involved in and working on now since the 90s even, I think,
Oh,
with
yes.
this project.
Oh,
So,
yes.
and this is phase 2, and it sounds like there's going to be a third phase that's coming up?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, there are quite a few phases to the project. This is probably phase 2 of those that are being rehabbed, but there was a phase 1, another phase 2, probably phase 3. It's been around a long time.
Is there anybody else who wants to give us information about this, or anybody from Hope Community or any in the room who'd like to say a few words? Yeah, feel free.
Hello, Mr. Chair and fellow council members. My name is Will Delaney. I'm the Associate Director at Hope Community. We are the owner and developer for the Dundee Hope Block project. And as Ms. Crowther mentioned, yes, Hope Community has been very active there in the Phillips community, just around the corners of Franklin and Portland. The organization is actually in its 41st year and going back with our real estate work all the way to the early 1990s. I think the city sold some of those original projects to Hope for $1. You don't really sell them to us for that anymore, but that's okay. The money here is great. This is, again, as Ms. Crowther mentioned, 30 units of our oldest housing stock that just over time it needs to be rehabbed. The properties, because they're serving the lowest income folks, do not generate enough cash flow over time to kind of put back in some of those critical needs, the structural work, an old brick building that needs tuck pointing, roofs, some of the kitchen and bath stuff. So that's why we've come to the funders, Minnesota Housing, City of Minneapolis, and the Met Council to get this much needed funding and hopefully secure these buildings for a very long time to come.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Then seeing no questions, I'll move approval of the actions here. This is approving there's actually 3 steps. One is approving the award from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. Second is approving an extension of the terms of a loan to run simultaneously with the new debt. And the last is approving the release of 2 properties from the 1994 MCDA loan. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. Now will bring us to our last item. This is has to do with a contract with the Minnesota Homeownership Center. This is actually a contract that we've had for a while. I know that we've renewed it. I think we went out for an RFP at one point, maybe at my request or at others' request as well for these kind of services. And now we're coming back to look at it again. And I thought it might be useful for the committee to hear a little bit about what the Homeownership Center is doing and also what our contract and agreements are with them. So I think that Ms. Coleman's going to make a brief presentation.
Good afternoon, Chair Gordon and members of the committee. I'm Erica Coleman with CPED Housing. Staff is requesting approval to enter into 2 contracts with the Minnesota Homeownership Center to provide administration and oversight to home buyer education and financial wellness services in the aggregate amount of $275,000. The City of Minneapolis has one of the highest racial disparity gaps in homeownership in the country. Minneapolis was additionally impacted by the economic downturn and a high rate of foreclosure proceedings, particularly in North Minneapolis and pockets of South Minneapolis. To increase the opportunity for sustainable home ownership for low to moderate income households and communities of color in Minneapolis, the city has contracted with the Homeownership Center to offer counseling, homebuyer education, and financial wellness services. The Homeownership Center has a network of service providers to meet the needs of a diverse population and partners with nonprofit, culturally specific organizations to provide services to meet the goal of reducing the racial disparity gap in homeownership. City Council approved funding in the 2018 budget under two line items: $175,000 for homeownership counseling and outreach, and $100,000 for homeownership capacity. The funding will be used by the center to provide direct services and a centralized approach with the goal of ensuring that households living in or seeking to buy a home in the city of Minneapolis have access to standardized, high-quality counseling services. Staff has determined, through a previous request for proposal and survey of service providers, that the center is a one-source vendor that provides a centralized service and, as approved by the Permanent Review Committee on March 7th, 2018, has elected not to do a request for proposal process. Julie Coogan of the Minnesota Homeownership Center is here to provide an overview of the Homeownership Center and their work with the city of Minneapolis. Are there any questions?
I don't see any questions.
Good afternoon.
Welcome. Good
Nice to
afternoon.
see all of you. Thank you for having me here. I'm Julie Coogan. I'm the Executive Director of the Minnesota Homeownership Center. Excuse me, I'm fighting a little bit of a cold. We are a statewide organization. We're based in St. Paul, but do quite a bit of work, obviously, here in Minneapolis and throughout the state. Our mission is to promote and advance successful homeownership in Minnesota. Since our founding in 1993, we've served well over 200,000 households. As you can imagine, during the foreclosure crisis and the recession of recent memory, we were quite busy on foreclosure prevention and preservation of homeownership. We operate with a statewide network of community-based partners, including culturally specific organizations serving African American households, Southeast Asian households, Hispanic households, African immigrant population, and others. Our focus is on equitable access to homeownership. We serve those facing the greatest barriers to homeownership. We believe that equitable access to sustainable homeownership is essential to strong communities and creates assets and opportunities for generations to come. We foster intentional relationships among homeownership advisors, community partners, and industry stakeholders to advance equitable homeownership. As an intermediary, we support a network of diverse community-based organizations with funding, training, resources for delivering culturally responsive homeownership education and counseling. And we lead the development of innovative homeownership programming through inclusive collaboration and with the expertise of our network. We think of ourselves as serving as a bridge between the nonprofit community, particularly our nonprofit housing advisors, and the rest of the industry, real estate, lending, government, and others. And we really believe that strategic partnerships and collaboration is the advisable way to address equitable access to homeownership in Minneapolis and beyond. Some examples of partnerships that we have fostered over the years, for example, we spend quite a bit of time on outreach to real estate and lending professionals. We know that consumers approach real estate and lenders as a first stop for achieving homeownership. Many of those consumers not yet ready to go down that homeownership path. And many of those consumers, people who could benefit from our services. So we spend a lot of time doing education and outreach directly to real estate professionals and lenders, ensuring that they know about our services and that they know how to work best with first-time home buyers, that they're aware of programs like down payment assistance and affordable loan products and homebuyer education and counseling. Another example of partnerships that we've fostered over the years during the height of the foreclosure crisis, and these partnerships are still going on, they're just not as robust as they used to be. We partnered directly with Fannie Mae to bring Fannie Mae loss mitigation resources to Minneapolis and the rest of our service area, whereby Fannie Mae would directly fund our subgrantees and our network agencies as they worked to provide foreclosure prevention services to households and keep them in their homes. So we brokered that relationship and administered that relationship. Here locally, we're also, the Homeownership Center is a co-leader of the Homeownership Opportunity Alliance, along with Minnesota Housing, which is a cross-sector task force of organizations that have come together to look at the question of equitable access to homeownership. As Erica said, we have one of the worst homeownership rates in communities of color in Minnesota and in Minneapolis, and one of the highest rates of homeownership among white households. The Homeownership Opportunity Alliance has been formed to look at cross-sector and systemic approaches to addressing that disequity. This illustrates the breadth of our services. So consumers approach us through word of mouth, through their lenders, through real estate, through city officials that they may know, through other elected officials. And we do essentially an assessment about where they're at in the home buying process or where they are in their homeownership career. Are they just starting? Do they have credit issues? Are there some savings issues we need to address before they can get prepared? Are there some just basic financial wellness issues, some financial capacity issues, if you will, that we need to address before they're even ready to think about homeownership? And then we provide homebuyer education. If you've heard of the curriculum Homestretch, that's a curriculum that the Homeownership Center has created and we maintain, and it's delivered through that network of agencies that we work with. It's an 8-hour course. Many, if not all, of the affordable loan products and down payment assistance products require Homestretch or a similar program before consumers can access those programs. And then we do offer one-on-one home buyer counseling. So sometimes consumers will come to us and say, I just can't decide which mortgage is right for me. Can you help me figure this out? Can you help me identify what I really need to be thinking about? Post-purchase counseling and training, the primary way that this is delivered is through refinance counseling. So consumers who access special loans, so 0% loans or loans that are non-amortizing are required by the state of Minnesota to participate in refinance counseling before they can refi out of those loans. So is the refi of a 0% mortgage advisable for that consumer? And our counselors will provide that guidance and help the consumer decide how best to use that asset that they have as their home. Is refi advisable or is something else advisable? And then certainly our network is involved in HECM, or reverse mortgage counseling. Counseling is required by the federal government if senior citizens are to participate in reverse mortgage counseling. So our network of agencies provides that service as well. And then, as I mentioned earlier, foreclosure prevention. So our foreclosure prevention efforts involve meeting one-on-one with consumers to help them understand their current mortgage situation, help them prepare for negotiating with their lender, and sometimes even negotiating with the lender side by side with that consumer. We all heard during the foreclosure crisis how difficult it was to reach somebody at the lender servicer and to get a straight answer about what paperwork is needed, where the consumer's at in their loss mitigation process, et cetera. And our advisors are there to help consumers with that process. They're also there to help the consumers figure out if maintaining this home is what they want to do. Many consumers during the height of the crisis came to us and said, I just want to be done. I don't want to own this home anymore. And then we can advise them on a good soft landing for their next housing situation. The city and the Homeownership Center have partnered for many, many years. In fact, the city of Minneapolis was one of the founding members of our organization. So we have a long history of collaboration. And the city of Minneapolis, as in its role as a founding member, has a permanent seat on our board of directors, which is currently filled by Andrea Brennan. At the time that we were founded, Minneapolis was really in the lead on this topic of homebuyer education and counseling, as well as foreclosure prevention counseling. When we first started foreclosure prevention counseling here in Minneapolis, it was one of the only cities in the country that was paying attention to foreclosure and the impact that foreclosure and loss of homes could have on basic community health, let alone homeowner health. So the city has always been front and center on this issue, and for that we are grateful. And together we support this network of agencies here in Minneapolis, quite a robust network that offer the services that I talked about. This is the list of agencies that are providing services in the city of Minneapolis. Not all of them provide the full continuum of services that I showed, but a good majority of them provide financial wellness through at least homebuyer education and counseling. So a little bit about our results in 2017. In 2017, the budget from the city looks exactly like it does for 2018. There was $100,000 allotted for financial wellness, and also called capacity, and $175,000 for homeownership counseling and outreach, including foreclosure prevention counseling. I would just like to add, too, that one of the roles that we carry as the Homeownership Center is a funder of the agencies that we work with. And the $275,000 that the city of Minneapolis provided to the Homeownership Center and our network in 2017 leveraged over $850,000 from other sources just for the city of Minneapolis alone. And those sources include HUD, a program that we call Homeownership Education, Counseling, and Training, which is state dollars, and other federal programs specifically geared towards foreclosure prevention. Erica talked a little bit about the scope of services that was provided in 2017, and they're highlighted on this slide. But really, the overarching role of the Homeownership Center and how these dollars are used is to provide a centralized approach to that spectrum of homebuyer education and counseling that I illustrated earlier. So supporting the delivery of those services, the development of programs and standards, monitoring of the agencies that are delivering services to Minneapolis consumers so that we can ensure a highly professional, high quality service is being offered to citizens. We do a sub-grantee process, an application process for the funds so that we make sure that we're understanding how agencies are going to deliver those funds and so that we have an opportunity to make sure they understand what's expected of them. We do provide certification training to the homeownership advisors that work in our network agencies. They are required to be certified to do this work, and we do that certification training. And just in general, maintain a host of education, continuing education, certification training, job aids and tools, technical assistance, capacity building, et cetera, to make sure that services are delivered optimally to consumers. Here are some highlights of the service delivery that happened in 2017. I think some interesting things to note. The financial wellness numbers, 407. 2017 was our first full year of delivering those services specifically in Minneapolis with the funding that was provided by City Council. So we're pleased with those numbers. We anticipate those numbers will go up. What we're seeing in the post-recession world is more and more of our consumers presenting with financial wellness issues. Another number to note, foreclosure counseling is down a lot. That's a good number to see. 123 in Minneapolis is down from well over 1,000 at the peak of the recession. So we're pleased with that direction. Interestingly, the consumers who are coming to us for foreclosure counseling services have really protracted issues in their households and with their lending institutions. So while there are fewer cases, some of them are harder than we typically would see. So still an important service, but definitely less of our business than it has been in the past. Also draw your attention to the fact that 78% of the households that we served last year earned less than 80% of the area median income. So we are meeting our goal of serving those with the greatest need and the lowest income households. And then the final slide just shows the demographic composition, the racial composition of the households that we served. Between 55 and 60% of the households we served in Minneapolis last year are households of color. Again, we're pleased with that number. We want it to be higher, and we're continuing to work with our homeownership advisors to make sure that we're doing the outreach and adapting our program in a way that encourages participation. And then I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
So I've got a couple questions, and maybe you don't know the answers. I'm not sure, but I was wondering if you know what the Minneapolis home ownership gap is. A lot of times we get grouped with the Twin Cities, the metropolitan area.
Yeah, I don't. The gap in the state between white households, there's about a 39% gap statewide. So compared to the white homeownership rate and the rate of homeownership among households of color, there's a 39% gap there.
Okay, one thing I saw that was, I think it came out in just February, and it was looking at Minneapolis, St. Paul, Bloomington area, and
That's the
they're
MSA,
putting
yeah.
they're putting the white home ownership rate at 74.8%, black home ownership rate at 24.8%.
Yep, so it's
So
bigger
it's
in this MSA.
50%, and I think it is the highest, at least on this
Yeah,
that
that
study
would not
and
surprise
inventory.
me. Yeah, that would not surprise me.
So is there like a healthy home ownership rate that you want to see? Is 75%? So I think I've heard different numbers like 40% in a
Yeah,
city.
we always stop short of saying everybody should be a homeowner because we don't believe that. For some people are always going to self-select out of homeownership. Others are going to want to pursue it, and their financial situations might just not be ready at that time. So for me, it's about consumer driven is what is healthy. On the other hand, we also know that particularly for lower income households, homeownership is the single source of asset generation that they're going to have available to them. So in African American households, for example, 60% of the wealth is wrapped up in homeownership. So if there are things that are preventing consumers from achieving that level of asset generation, we want to be involved in helping address that.
Yeah, and it seems like if we're going to identify the gap as a problem, it would help us to know what it is and maybe to help get some good strategies. Obviously, a lot of what you're doing is what you think are good strategies to help close and address that gap. So maybe in the future I'll be interested in learning more about it, or maybe Ms. Brennan wants to share some information. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. We do have that data. We just don't have it at our fingertips right now, so we can certainly follow up right away. Overall, the gap between white homeowners and homeowners of color is a little bit lower than it is, I think, statewide. but it is different for different racial groups within that. So we'll follow up.
I appreciate that. And the number is basically based on per capita, how many of those people have own homes? So if we were going to say, let's look at Native American home ownership rates, it would be a smaller total, and there'd probably be
That's
a
correct.
much bigger
That's correct.
gap between the others. So
That's correct.
that would be interesting to get that information and to see, because a lot of times what we find in our city is it's Native Americans and Blacks who seem to have the biggest disparities.
Right.
Even if you just compare it with the whole city population or with different demographic groups like whites.
Right.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I don't see any other questions. Anybody have any other comments or questions before I move to authorize this contract? Okay, then I'm going to move. I warned you. Here I am moving. I'll move approval then of this contract. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. That motion carries, and seeing no further business before us, this meeting is adjourned. 33.